I'm standing on a little platform here. I'm slightly height impaired, and I prefer to see all of you. So good morning. It's very nice to be here with you. It's always a pleasure for me to be with educators. Having been a former college president and senior advisor to the U.S. Department of Education under the prior administration, one of the things I hope I still do is stay in touch with all of you who are in the trenches, and that's something I try to do myself by teaching across the educational pipeline. I like the name, by the way, Learning House. I think it's a wonderful way to capture what I hope we all do, which is continue to learn in whatever house we occupy, whether that's a university or a business or our own home. So over breakfast with Todd, I hope I shared the value of learning and learning houses. And by the way, I really did write a joke book. I write a children's book series which shocks most people, and some of them are educational jokes. So if I notice this talk isn't going well, perhaps I'll shift over and tell education jokes from giraffes, which, by the way, are going extinct. And I just want to add one more thing. I normally never dress in the colors of an organization where I'm speaking, and I don't know what happened today, but I apparently am dressed in the Learning House outfit. I'd like you to know that's totally accidental. All right. Let me start by saying that I would be a very wealthy woman if every time I was asked by a professor or a teacher, get me better students, and I got a nickel for every time I was asked that question. I could retire somewhere amazing. And my answer to everyone who asks me that question, get me better students, is these are our students. Let's find a better way to teach them so they succeed. And so the core of my remarks with you today are about who are our students today and as we progress forward, because the ones born now in 2018 are the ones you're going to be educating in 2040, and it is not too late, it's almost too late, but not too late to think about those students and be prepared for them. And so I think we have to start with the premise that the students of today and tomorrow, and all of you out here are educators or participating in education in some way, the students of today and tomorrow are not our clones. We are not teaching ourselves. And the students that we're teaching are very different from us, but not in a negative way. They are different from us. And that calls upon us, upon all of us, to think differently about who they are. So let me share a little bit about who they are. The students of today and into the future, as some of Todd's slides show, are not all 18 years old who are first to start college at 18 and then progress straight through without a stop out or drop out or pause out, and then graduate and maybe go to grad school or go into the workplace. The students of today and tomorrow are very diverse. They will be not just racially diverse, they will be ethnically diverse, they will be diverse in terms of their age and their life experience. And so the idea, and by the way, there'll be more first-generation students also, and there'll be a huge number of low-income students. So if you think about that, there's a lack of homogeneity in terms of who our students are. And so, in fact, today, what we call minority students will actually be majority students. And we will have the white minority students. And it's really important as you think about your own campuses and think about how you're dealing with your students, that you really recognize who they are and what you can do to teach them successfully. And why does that matter? Because their age and stage and ethnicity and minority status and first-gen status and set of life experiences all impact how you teach them, where you teach them, when you teach them, why you teach them. And so that whole cadre of issues is deeply impacted by who our students are. So I put this up, which shows up in a book of mine about sort of lack of understanding of who our students are. I hope you can read it. I wish my teacher knew sometimes my reading is not signed because my mom is not around. And I say that because actually what happens in the pre-K all the way through 20, the whole educational pipeline affects collegiate education. And it actually affects post-secondary education. So the idea that we can just think about college and what students come into college and exit college is way too narrow a frame. We have to think about who's preparing and how they're preparing the students who are coming to us, and then what happens to them when they leave us. And if we're not thinking across the educational pipeline and partnering with high schools and partnering with elementary schools and thinking about what's happening in preschool, we won't be ready to effectively teach the students that will exist. Let me give you one example. There's a kindergarten class that learns math using iPads. Well, I actually think that kindergarten teacher should provide professional development to math professors. That's the inverse, by the way, of how we usually do professional education, which is that the math professor talks to the elementary or preschool teacher in somewhat of a degrading way about the future of math and how to teach math and the importance of math. I actually think professors need to know how kids are learning math now. They have to know about manipulables. They have to know about how they can use technology and are using technology in the classroom. And sadly, many of the people doing the math teaching in college don't have that same fluidity with technology that their students will have, and so we'll have a gap. And so how we think about professional education, how we prepare our professors to teach, which is not something we usually do. We reward them for their subject matter expertise, but we don't spend a whole lot of time helping them learn to teach, is really important given who our students will be. So I want to talk about the impact of how we think about students. So today we operate off what I'd call a deficit model. This is at all phases of education, by the way. And a deficit model is when you figure out what's wrong with the student and then you offer something to help them. So, by way of example, oops, students having trouble keeping up with the reading. Let's send them to the reading tutor over here to help them improve their reading. And oops, this group of students is having trouble writing, so let's send them to the writing center to help them over there. And oops, this group of students is having trouble with math, so we're going to send them to the math support team that's going to help them do better. In other words, there's something wrong with the student, and we're going to remediate that wrong. Don't get me started on remedial education. Remediate that wrong so that they can keep up with their peers. And by the way, along the way, let's denigrate the high schools that they went to. They're coming to us unprepared, unready, without the skills that I had when I started college. Okay, for starters, the kids didn't get to pick which high school they went to, nor did they get to pick their parents or their socioeconomic status. So embedded in a deficit model is a whole set of assumptions about looking down on people. I suggest we operate from a strength-based model. A strength-based learning model that focuses actually on the skills many of the students of today and tomorrow have. Many of the skills we don't recognize. And the onus is on us as educators to actually provide things not to the students in a deficit model as if there's something wrong with the students, but to build off the strengths that the students have. So what kind of strengths are those? Well, kids who have come out of a wide range of environments tend to be creative, really good problem solvers. They tend to have very hyper-vigilant capacities. In other words, they can read people and read emotions really well. And they may not have read the books that everybody else thinks are sort of the necessity to have a foundation, but they can think creatively. They can add to conversations about life experience. They can share wisdom about the depth and breadth of emotions, particularly those that come from traumatized situations, toxic stress, and abuse. And so what I'd like to think about is a changed paradigm, where instead of fixing the student, which is what the deficit model does, to operating off a strength-based model, which builds off the strengths that the students have. But it does mean that you have to recognize that they have them, you have to know what those strengths are, and then you have to figure out how to build off of them. And who's responsible for that change? That's the responsibility of institutions that have to think very differently, I think, about how they handle the students that they have. Now, let me add to all of this. We tend to think in education about big things, like the charts Todd showed, graphs going up or down or big trends. I'd like to suggest that we lose sight of what I'd call little things. Little things actually matter, and one of the most striking things to me when I was a college president is that you could do 99 things right for a student, but it's the one thing that went wrong that affects the entire outcome, and that student's perception of his or her life on campus. And whether that happened in the academic side of the house, or the student life side of the house, or the athletic side of the house, one bad encounter, one person who treated that student in a way the student found disrespectful, whether or not intended, has unbelievable consequences. And often, the professor or staff person or residential hall person is completely unaware of what it is they did that led to that student being so angered, outraged, or otherwise disappointed. And once you have that, it's really hard to learn. It's really hard to learn when you feel that the institution that's supposed to be supporting you and the people who are supporting you are actually not doing that. So I want to give you just a couple examples. I may not do all of these. I can come back to them. And by the way, I'm staying through lunch and early afternoon, so if you want to find me, I'd be more than delighted to chat with you more informally about some of these. Let me start with the red pen. So many faculty edit student work, whether they do it online through a tracking system or they do it with a literal red pen. You don't need a whole lot of messaging when you get that back that, uh-oh, I didn't do a very good job here. I'd like to know why we use red. Red's a hot color. Why don't we use a different color? Why don't we use blue or purple? Kids would respond way better to a color that isn't red, like, uh-oh, wrong, blood, bad, stop. So that's true for college students as well. And if you put more red on there than there was original font, that's kind of like a message, like, oops, you didn't get it. I get correcting papers. Ask how many students actually read the red. Not that many. So a little thing like the color of the ink or the font matters. So let me talk about grade D. So for many students, when they get to college, they get that first test in Intro to Bio or Intro to Statistics or college algebra or English, and their first paper is a D. We could debate whether we shouldn't have grades in the first semester, but whatever. That D, for some students, sends out a message, I can't make it in college. And if I can tell you how many students have said, I think I need to drop out. I called home, and my wife, my mother, my father, my kid, whomever they call, said, who? I told you college wasn't right for you. That's why you got a D. Now, I've called many of those students into my office and said, I'd like to tell you about the D I got. And the D almost every faculty person got somewhere along the way if they're honest with themselves. And a D doesn't mean you won't succeed. A D means you do what education helps you to do. You take risks, you're here, you're learning, and the next paper won't be a D. And every year I would adopt 2 or 3 kids at the college and say, I want to see you next week when your next quiz comes. And then the next one and the next one and the next one. And that kid would then go talk to his or her friends and say, you know, the president's seeing me every week and I'm sharing my grades, and you know what? I didn't get a D the next time. I got a C. Okay, not great, but better than a D. And the next time I did a paper, I got a B. So I just want to point out little things matter. So I want to do a little exercise with you about participation. So let me just say something else here. We talk about the difference changing how we educate. And we talk about moving from sages on stages to guides on the side. And yet we run our conferences, this isn't an offense to you, we run our conferences about sages on stages and we forget about the guides on the sides, right? So there are lots of people here who are really smart who could get up here and do what I'm doing. And yet what we do is we structure it, and yet when we want to talk about how students should learn, we want them to learn in groups, we want them to problem solve. So we're not demonstrating the kind of learning we're trying to promote. It's really totally whacked. And we do this, by the way, with teacher training too. We get up and talk to teachers like this and say, you know, it's really important that you do group learning and engage in problem solving and not lecture. Oh, by the way, I just am lecturing to you up here. Okay, so I'm trying, generally speaking, in my presentations to do them differently. So here's the first engagement. It's like 1 of 3 or 4 that we're going to do over the next bit. I hope someone's keeping track of the time here. What I'd like you to do is read collectively the color that's up there next to each word. So go ahead. Let's go as a group. Red. Okay, how easy was that? Quite, right? I mean, it should be pretty easy. And I'm sure some of you have done this before. Now do it again. What I want you to do is read the color. Go ahead, start. Black, red, green. Did you pick up the problem people were having? Okay, so you all read really well. I know that. But the problem is that when you ask someone to read the color, not the word, or you can do it the other way, read the word, not the color, people have a hard time in that little gap synapse where they have trouble doing what they really know how to do. That's what happens when we deal with students, okay? Whole sorts of things happen in our head in microseconds that we're not aware of, that to students feel like lack of attentiveness, lack of interest, lack of concern, lack of value, and it's not happening because people intend to do that. It's happening at a micro level. But if you practice, you actually can get better at it. So what you want to do now is read the actual color that's up there. So let's try it one more time. Louder, come on. Whoa, start over, woo, time out. Time out, time out, time out. Okay, so start over and do it again, right? Okay, go ahead.
Black, red, green, blue, green, red, blue, black, red.
Bravo. Okay, other than a few stragglers out there. So my point of this exercise, and it's actually a really good one for students, to realize that we make really quick assumptions and do things really fast without recognizing some of the impact of what we do. There's a very rich literature, by the way, on subliminal and unconscious bias and our autonomic system. So one of the big trends coming over the next 20 years in education, some of it's come, some of it's coming, are the subject of a new book I'm writing called Breakaway Education, and to think about those trends. And one of those, which is very apt for this group to talk about, is technology. And technology is a really hard word for many educators. They see the need for it, but they actually have a fear that was demonstrated this morning when the slide deck didn't work. Like, I'm going to get in front of my class, and it isn't going to work, or I'll be in the middle of an online course, and something will go kaflooey, and I won't be able to get to the students, or I won't be able to post, and I don't have those skills, and where's the tech guy in the plaid shirt who can run up to my office and fix it like in a nanosecond? I think one of the fears is that if you are scared of technology and scared of its breakdown and scared of how it works, you can talk a good game about you see its importance, but you're not comfortable using it. And so I could tell you the number of schools, elementary and secondary schools, that have technology. It either sits in the back in unopened boxes or is used in the most rudimentary form. And so to get faculty to use technology and to use it well and to benefit from what it offers is not so easy. And I actually think to do it well, we need to change the paradigm. So what we now do is we give faculty technology, and we hope they'll figure out how to use it. And maybe we give them a little seminar or two on how to get whatever program we've just installed for them to work. But what we don't do often is engage them in the development of that technology so that it works for them. So instead of technology being done to faculty, it should be done with faculty. They should be active participants in the design of technology, even if they can't actually program, and in what the technology should be doing for them, not to them. So this is a really key difference. Ask faculty, what could technology do for you? How could we design technology to make what you do better? Not, here's the technology, go use it. And so my suggestion for those of you who are working with faculty is to think about ways you can engage them in how technology can work for them by getting their input into that technology. What is it they want to get out of it? And if they want it, it's highly more likely that it will succeed. So let me now, with that, talk about, so technology is one huge driver that's going to impact what happens in education over the next 20 years. I should add, within technology is artificial intelligence too. And think about it. You may recall I said a few minutes ago the Sage on Stage thing and guides on the side. Think about technology where you do with students amazing problem sets, and then faculty say, but well, where's the foundation? You need the foundation. How are you going to do high scientific research if you don't know the basics of chemistry and biology and physics? How about nano lectures? Little nano lectures, 5 minutes. You can think about key subject areas that are involved in the problems you're trying to solve. And if students want to get that content, go take a nano lecture or a mini lecture and do that. Okay. So in addition to technology being a driver of the future, so is trauma. And I know that's not exactly an upbeat subject, but I want to talk about why trauma is such a driver, regrettably. So how many of you know what ACEs are? Just raise your hand. Hi. Okay, I'd like the rest of you to look around and see how many people have their hands raised. There's one, I think one or two. Okay, so ACEs are Adverse Childhood Experience Scores. It's a test. It's a 10-part test. They can be taken very quickly. It's available online. I'm actually going to give you a couple of questions for you to take a piece of the test now. ACEs are the best predictor of how students will do in school, in college, in their life after college, how their health will be, how engaged they'll be in their communities. This is something like golf where you want a low score. It's scored 1 to 10. You want 0 or 1 in a perfect world. But anybody who's got a score over 4 is likely to experience increased health issues, including depression, failures in school in terms of their capacity to progress and succeed, difficulties engaging with others, difficulties graduating, depression, suicidality, and the like. And in terms of numbers, if you just want some numbers, so I want to make sure I give you the exact numbers here. So 2/3 of all people who take the ACE test click off at least 1, have a score of 1. And of those who scored at least 1, 87% of kids have more than 1. And 12.5% of kids have 5 or more, 4 or more. Think about that. That's a huge percentage of students who at some level are registering that they've had trauma, toxic stress, or abuse, all of which are measured by the ACE scores. Now, there are some states actually that are mandating that pediatricians give ACE scores and do an ACE examination because it'll tell people how to be ready for the students that you have. It'll be predictive of health. And social determinants of health are measured by the ACE score. So if you've never taken it yourself and you teach now, you should take that. And if you're an administrator of students at any educational institution or are involved with students, go take the ACE test. It will not only tell you a lot about yourself, it will tell you a lot about your students. And one of the interesting things is, I know most people want O's or 1s, but if you're in a group, you'll often find that the group average is way above 0 or 1 if people are honest about where they came from. Now, I've been very honest about my ACE score. Remember, the highest is 10, the lowest is 0. Anyone with a 4 or higher is at enormous risk for both health and educational adverse outcomes. My ACE score is 7, just so we're clear. This is not about race. This is not about socioeconomic status. This is about life experiences that you've had, and this is the test that measured it. So what I'd like you to do, and you do not have to share this, although I want to come back to sharing in a minute, I'm going to give you 3. There should be paper there in front of you. I just want you to put a check mark if you have experienced this. This is just 3 of the 10 questions. So this is asking you as an adult about your childhood, okay? There are ones that you actually give to children. But these are the questions given to someone over 18 about their childhood. Did an adult or parent or other one who was your guardian swear at you, insult you, or put you down or make you afraid when you were young? Check as a you got that one. So again, did an adult, parent, guardian swear at you or insult you or put you down or make you afraid when you were young? Second question, were your parents divorced or separated or somehow otherwise not living together? Second question. Third one, was anyone in your household a problem drinker, an alcoholic, or a user of street drugs? So, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but if I were a guessing person, there are a number of you here who had at least one tick, 1 point. My guess is that a sizable number of you had 2, and some of you had 3. These scores are really important. You got to know your students. You have to know where they came from. And with the increase of both person-made and natural disasters, which fit under big T and little t up there, trauma. So trauma is divided into 2 groups. One is big T trauma. Big T trauma is like a shooting at a school. Big T trauma is usually a one-time event, a volcano that erupts, fires in California, a massive hurricane. Little T trauma, by the way, the little t doesn't mean unimportant. It just means trauma that's ongoing and continuous. You have a parent who drank. You lived in a household where there was dysfunction. You're homeless. You're food deprived. All of those things. Many people suffer from big or little trauma. And sadly, increasingly, big trauma is taking a huge role in the lives of students, families, and communities. So if you think about something like Parkland, which is a high school, it's not that the people only affected were the families of the children and teacher and coach who tragically died. It's of all the children and teachers and families in that school. It's also children in schools across our nation and parents across our nation who suddenly start thinking about, I don't know, should we arm our teachers? Should we put more doors up? Should we have drills? Should we have people get under their desk? Should we post on walls? Should we have drills where we do emergency drills? All of these events impact education. So I went to I have a special certificate in trauma, clinical trauma intervention. Psychological first aid is what it's called. And so I recently was in Las Vegas after the shooting, and I was in a room filled with teachers and parents and educators from the Las Vegas school system after the biggest mass shooting in America. And I'm thinking, you need to know, and by the way, you should run a course on how to educate teachers about trauma. Well, after you've had a trauma like this, you don't just open the book and go, where were we before we were so rudely interrupted as we were studying American history? Or, oh, what problem was that we were on? Or, where in our textbook or online learning were we before this tragedy? That's not how you need to respond to these. You need to do something different. And so I developed a concept called elasticity to deal with trauma. And while elasticity has many parts to it, and I probably don't have time here to share them all with you, at the core of elasticity is 2 notions that you need to know about. One is the role of reciprocity. The key aspect of helping anybody who's got a high ACE score, and it happens to also help everyone else. It's like rising tide lifts all boats. If you help your most vulnerable students, you will be helping all your students. It doesn't work in the converse. If you help your all perfect students, it doesn't filter down. But if you help your students struggling with one thing or another on a strength-based model, it actually lifts up all I could fall off the stage. Lifts all students. So the key here is reciprocity. Now, reciprocity means you need an environment in which students can engage with someone ideally a faculty member, a residential life member, a coach, a teaching assistant, a housemaster, someone in health services, someone in the tutoring. You need to connect to someone. And in the beginning, it isn't exactly reciprocal. It's, in the beginning, sort of one-way reciprocity. The other person, the non-student, engages with the student. Now, culturally, not everybody's comfortable going, gee, you know, I got a 7 ACE score. Or, can't believe that my whole town was blown up. Or my best friend was shot. Or that 3 of my friends died in a car accident. So one of the things, there are strategies for dealing with this, which ties into gift giving. These are called kimochis. I think they should be on the next slide. Let's see. Okay. So kimochis are a way of letting kids, adults, others, get in touch with their feelings without having to go around and disclose them. In some cultures, disclosing your emotions right away is really hard, particularly with strangers. By the way, why do we expect students to be able to disclose their financial status with financial aid officers whom they've never met to discuss a topic like money, which is harder than most people to discuss than sex on their first day of school? Like, hello, that's not going to happen. So anyway, so these little kimochis, I used to keep a bowl of them in my office. And I'd say after something happened on campus, pick one, take one. Take one that feels like you. Put it on a carabiner and wear it. And if your emotion changes, go swap it out for another one. So if you're sad today but curious tomorrow, pick that one up. And by the way, faculty, you can get one too. And after a while, our entire campus was wearing kimochis. By the way, you can do it with kids too. But because on the other side is a picture of what the emotion is, and on the front side is the work. So I actually have some of these to give out. So during the Q&A, we'll give some out to those of you who ask questions. But kimochis are amazing. So this is a strategy to create reciprocity. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You can create reciprocal strategies on your campuses that will enable students to feel more comfortable so they can learn. Learning involves risk-taking. You got to get people off the cliff, and you have to be able to help them be in an environment where learning happens. That's students of today and students of tomorrow, particularly ones with high ACE scores, which are going up, sadly, for many students in light of the natural and human disasters that are occurring. There are lots of ways to do this, but I have a couple up there for you in addition to kimochis. So these are kimochis. And what you're doing, just to be clear, is you're building reciprocity, so you create a learning environment in which students aren't viewed as a deficit model, but on a strength-based model where they feel comfortable learning. So I used to deliver cookies on the first day of school to every residential student, room by room. The dean of students and I would go room by room by room, delivering homemade cookies in baskets. And the first thing I would say to students is there anything I can do to make your life better? And they'd be like, shocked. Like, are you really asking? I said, yeah, I'm really asking. Is there anything I can do to make your life better? And sometimes they would say things like, yeah, the plug in the wall isn't working, or the light bulb's out, or I don't have a shower curtain. And after we did this once, I realized, okay, we're taking a notepad and we're going to fix everything that they come up with that's making their life miserable. But some of them would say, no, I'm really happy. I'm doing well. And I'd say, that's good. And somebody would say, I'm miserable, I'm homesick. And then I'd talk about homesickness to that little group. And then I'd say to the student who was homesick, come and see me in my office. I've been homesick too. It feels really awful. And it feels like it'll never go away, and like your stomach's going to fall out. But it gets better. And by the way, everybody around here is going to be homesick. It's just a matter of when. Some people will be homesick week 1. Some will be homesick week 14 when they come back from Thanksgiving and have to leave their family again. So cookie delivery was a big thing on my campus. And one year we had a volleyball game the first week. And so there was no cookie delivery because I went to the volleyball game. And I got a number of emails from students. What? Where are the cookies? The cookies. And I have other fun stories. I'll tell you just one, just so you can get a sense of how this works. I'm in a group of students with the dean of students, and a student who hadn't been there when I got there came in, and she goes, oh, what are these? And the dean of students go, these are cookies. And she goes, well, who are you? So the dean of students goes, I'm the dean of students. My name's Anne, and you probably saw me at orientation. Nice to meet you. What's your name? Kid gave her name, and then the student turns to me and says, who are you? And I go, I'm Karen Gross, and I'm the president of the college. She goes, no, who are you really? I go, no, really. And her friends are going, that's really her. And I have to tell you, those chocolate chip and sugar cookies and oatmeal raisin cookies and chocolate cookies more to create reciprocity than almost anything that could have happened on our campus. We also had book signing events for faculty and staff, and I just want to share this. Many schools give out books to students when they come, first-year reading or campus reading. If you're on a campus, you've probably done it at some point, and you bring the author in, you have first-year seminars on this. We did the same thing, except when the book came, every faculty member and staff member signed that book. And I would say to each of them, this is your commitment to the student who gets that book to help them succeed. And the students, by the way, got a book also signed by every member of the faculty and staff when they graduated, the bookends of their undergraduate education. And we had a ceremony where the students would walk across the stage and I'd give them this book. And I said to each and every one of them as a group, my biggest hope is that 10 years from now, you'll pull these books off the shelf and look at the names of the men and women who helped you become who you are. And faculty and staff who signed these books felt an increased obligation to work to help these students succeed. The students weren't in a deficit mode. The faculty was in an empowering mode. So let me just say a little bit about transitions. We do a really bad job of transitions in education, moving from high school to college, college into the workforce, elementary school into middle school, into high, we're just really bad at it. And the idea that we do financial aid education, by the way, during orientation when you're trying to find your way to the bathroom or figure out who your roommate is, I mean, like, all bad. So one thing I would suggest to you is that the one-off orientation isn't working. You need more than one orientation. Who can get educated once when you can't listen? Do orientation 2, 3, 4 times. Do it in the first year, the second year, the third year, the fourth year. Do different kinds of orientation so people feel an opportunity to succeed. So a message here is also about speaking and encouraging students to speak, because part of reciprocity is that students have to feel free and empowered to speak. So I would just want to tell this story here for a sec. I'm the short little one there, like in the middle. I'm barely visible. That's in Luxembourg. And the African-American player behind me, his name's Nick. And Nick was offered a professional basketball contract to play in Europe. And he was one course short from graduation. And I said to Nick, oh, no, you got to graduate. And he said, I got to go. I have an opportunity to play. And I said to him, all right, we're going to figure out a way. This is before online became very popular. We're going to find a professor who's willing to teach you online, and you're going to finish that course, and you'll sign your professional contract in my dining room. So Nick signed the contract, he finished the course, and he graduated. A promise made and a promise kept. About a year later, Nick came back and said, you know, I'm now playing in Europe, and I might get promoted to this higher league. If I get promoted, would you come to see me play? And I said, well, we've done this promise made, promise keep thing. Yeah, I promise that if you get up to the next league, I'll go watch you play. Never in a million years did I figure this would happen. His family didn't have passports. Nobody could afford to go. Nick gets put up to this higher team, and I get on a plane to Luxembourg and watch Nick play. And we wrote an article called The Promises Made and the Promises Kept. Education is all about reciprocity. It starts before students get to you, hopefully. It occurs while they're with you, and hopefully it happens after they leave you. And I want to leave you with this. If we don't do some of this, education is going to go the way of the dodo bird. Okay? We will obsolesce. We'll be making carbon paper in an age where we don't need carbon paper. So educational reform is not really about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's about changing fundamentally how we think about our students, who they really are, and how we can teach them as they go into the future. So I'd like to do one more exercise with you. So I think in front of you is an envelope and a piece of paper. And what I would like you to do, apropos actually of a comment Todd made, is I'd like you to write down one thing in light of this presentation that you will do. And I want you to address the envelope to yourself, and Learning House will mail it back to you in 4 to 6 weeks, and you can see if you did whatever it is. And it has to be a concrete thing you're going to do. I'm going to go take the ACE test, or I'm going to read X, or I'm going to go buy Kimochis. Goodness knows that company should give me them for free. Whatever. I want you to write down one concrete thing you're going to do in light of this last 60, 45 minutes. I want you to put it in an envelope and address the envelope to you. I hope you can come up with at least one thing. By the way, I've done this exercise many times. It's really funny for people. They forget they did this, and then they open their mail, and there's this piece of paper there. And many times people have actually done the thing in it, and sometimes they haven't, and it jogs their memory to do it. It's also designed, this is an exercise designed to prevent one-off events. If I just come and speak to you, that's a one-off event. I come, I go, you don't see me or talk to me again. That's not useful. The idea of learning is continuity and ongoing learning that's linked with reciprocity. And so this envelope is my message to you to carry forward what we've been doing here forward. So if you'd address the envelope, Learning House will pick them up from your table when you go to lunch. I think we have time for a few questions. I will also be at lunch, so I'd welcome chatting with you there. I hope this has set the right tone for the conference. I hope it was helpful to you, and it's been my pleasure to speak with you. Thank you. So I guess we have 10 minutes for questions. Happy to take any and all, and as I used to say to students, I'll answer anything as long as it's within the realm of decency. Here, I think there's a mic. And she just got a Kimochi. Could we just show
And it's
that?
accurate. It's excited.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm really interested in the ACEs test. I've never heard that before, and it's something I feel like I feel like a light bulb went off. So this is something I definitely want to incorporate, and it also helps us, school is one fraction of a person's life. How do we make the other parts of their life fit in where they're capable of learning? So when you get the ACEs test, I guess I'm like, what's next? What resources are next?
So I've written a whole book about, the book is called Breakaway Learners. I don't normally advertise my book, and I can show you my children's book too. Okay, Breakaway Learners comes on in ebook, which is a much cheaper way to get it. It also comes in paperback. It's a book about how to think about the students of the future and what we can do to help them learn. What is it a campus can do? A big or a small or a medium-sized campus can do to change its culture, to enable breakaway learners. And breakaway learners are students who don't look like us necessarily, but students who are first-gen, low-income, high ACE, struggling from low-quality high schools to get some success in post-secondary education. Those are breakaway learners. They've taken an enormous risk to go to college. So this book is actually all about how to help them. And it has a set of strategies, concrete strategies, like Kimochi's and others, to help kids succeed, and things you can do on campus, activities you can do on campus to engage your community. Because remember, it's the community culture that has to change. The students aren't changing. You're getting the students. The question is, how do you help them? So, please. Oh, God, I'm having a little trouble with these lights.
I was wondering if you have any suggestions or examples of successful strategies to create reciprocity in an online space.
That's a really good question because the challenge is very real there as to how to create reciprocity. I'm going to answer your question, but first I'm going to tell you something I did. So I just took my first online course. And I did it because I wanted to see how exactly you could increase engagement and how did it feel compared to a brick and mortar course, which I took another one almost simultaneously. So I could compare how I did, how my learning was in both the brick and mortar course and the online course. It was quite an experiment. I really should write about it. So the short answer to my experiment was that I thought the online course had way better content and was way more thoughtful than the in-person. But the in-person one had the benefit of camaraderie and shared collaboration that was missing in the online version of the course I took, which had plenty of engagement, by the way, tons of engagement. So one way I think has to be through chat rooms. There have to be opportunities for the students not only to get to know each other, but to get to know the faculty person with whom they're engaging. And if the materials aren't taught by a professor on the ground that they can see or meet, there needs to be some faculty person assigned to an online course with whom students can engage. And the engagement has to be real. It can't just be answer these rote questions. Okay, let me back up. We focus on content learning in higher ed, as if content learning were the be-all, end-all. But technology has taught us that content learning can be put in nano lectures. The real learning is problem solving, analytic skills, creativity, teamwork, imagination. Those aren't as easily pocketed. So our focus on content has to go down, and you need it, but you can get it different ways. Our focus on problem solving, group work, engagement, and those kinds of things can happen in an online course if you create the opportunity to do that. Students can do group projects online if the online program is good enough. They don't even have to meet. They can engage with each other online. That's a way to create reciprocity. But it has to be more than the delivery of information from a person out, and that's it. That will never replace brick and mortar. And it will never create the level of engagement that you need to make it work. And you want someone to feel connected. Reciprocity is all about connectedness. So that's an outstanding question and a quick answer to a complicated question. Any others? Since I stand between you and lunch? All right. So I think that's it. Okay, thank you.